Now for today's program. Oded Ailam is a former head of the Counterterrorism Division in the Mossad, and he is currently a researcher at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. He has been featured on CNN, Fox News, The Washington Post, Newsmax, and Newsweek, as well as with most of the major European media. Oded writes in Israel Hayom newspaper and other international outlets, and appears regularly on primetime television in Israel. Dan Raviv was a CBS News correspondent for more than 40 years, covering stories throughout the world while writing books mostly about Israel's intelligence agencies, including Spies Against Armageddon and Target Iran. Dan is a Moment contributor and is the host of the podcast The Mossad Files. Please welcome Oded Ailam and Dan Raviv.
Thank you, Suzanne, and hello to everyone who's a fan of Moment magazine. You should be. It's a great read. And the Moment magazine Zoominars that we have from time to time. And this one was hurriedly arranged because there's a war on, right? It started this past Saturday morning. I co-authored my sixth book with Yossi Melman, who's a brilliant Israeli journalist, just last year, called Target Iran. It was explaining the background to the 12-day war this past June. And here we are again. And intelligence and how the Mossad had penetrated Iran are really big parts of the story. And so Oded Ailam is perhaps the perfect person to turn to because you were inside the Mossad, Oded. You've been out for around 15 years, but I know you're still in touch, still watching, still commenting, still with a lot of friends who know a lot. And so it's clear that this war that started Saturday morning is not going to be a 6-day war, not some lightning victory, yet we're speaking on the 6th day of the war. So Oded Ailam, let me ask you first, how do you think the war is going as of now?
First of all, thanks for having me here on Moment Magazine, and thanks for Dan, which I know for quite a few years as an extremely capable expert on the subjects. And I will just say a few words about this incredible tectonic change in the Middle East, and I think even in the world. I will just even comment on one thing before I go into the details of the war. Until now, there is certain one big winner in the war, and this is the United States. And why I say that, because the two losers of this war, immediate losers, are not necessarily Iran. I will talk about Iran later, but in fact it's China and Russia. Let's not forget, Russia has a arm agreement and a defense agreement with Iran. China is the main importer of oil from Iran. It had gathered around 1,800,000,000 barrels in China that are stocked, that can maintain China for at least 100 days if the Hormuz straits are closed. She was sponsoring Iran. Iran, in a way, was a proxy of China. Everything in you have to know, every single thing in Iran is imported from China. I'm talking about GPS. I'm talking about cars. I'm talking about everything. And Iran was, in a way, as I said before, some sort of a proxy of China. And yet, to the astonishment of the world, both had deserted and abandoned their ally. You see nothing from them. Iran, it doesn't get any sort of supply from China regarding anti-aircraft missile, the HQ-9 battery, or missiles, or even the basic thing to create fuel for the missile. And I'm talking about fossil fuel, not the regular one. Nothing. And the same applies for Russia. Russia did not replace those systems, the S-300 that were attacked back in the 12 Days War. And in fact, we hear nothing, only mumbling on the diplomatic level. And they actually deserted completely. Now, this sends a very clear message by the United States to the rest of the world. Listen, don't trust those two fellows, because when in the D-Day, they will desert you. Now, regarding the war itself, few things.
Yeah.
First of all, I don't think nobody in Iran, and I'm saying absolutely nobody, had anticipated the powerful and the immense attack of the most two powerful armies in the world, which is the Israeli one and the American one. No one in Iran had anticipated anything like that. I think even in the worst scenarios, they were thinking about a very, very short strike, something like we had seen for Du and Natanz, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 days at the most. Nobody had even thought they would see anything on that scale. And when I'm talking about that scale, I'm talking about a total annihilation of their capabilities. The Navy doesn't exist anymore. Here and there, there's some sort of speedboats that can cause some damage and so on. But the immense Iranian Navy doesn't exist anymore. I'm talking about the missile and the ballistic of Iranians. About 50 to 60% of them had been eradicated, and also the launchers. They started with about 400 launchers, and I think it's degraded to about 150, and soon they will have no launchers. Launcher, of course, is quite easy to create, but under these circumstances, that there are barrage of bombardments on all factories, firms, production lines, it will be very hard for them to try to establish some sort of new systems. And of course, command and control posts, and now we are the both Air Force are attacking a symbol of the administration, a symbol of the regime, like the parliament, like places like that, headquarters of the hated Basij and the Republican Guard. So we are seeing something on such a large scale that, in fact, took by total shock and surprise the military and the Republican Guards.
Let me just come in, Oded, to focus that even more on the shock, if I will. And I'm going to say to our viewers of this Moment Magazine Zoominar that you, former Mossad man, an independent analyst now in Israel, that all seems very optimistic, pointing to the tactical victories. Some of it is strategic, wider. As you say, Russia and China are just keeping out, and that's good for the U.S. But let's keep it on the tactical, the war itself, how the bombs are being used. Nothing is bigger than the killing of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, in the first minutes of the war this past Saturday morning, with dozens of other leaders. As one Israeli intelligence official said, 40 leaders in 40 seconds. That's somewhat similar to last June. Amazing intelligence, knowing where they would be, the Iranians making a mistake of being at a meeting. But the supreme leader, above all, take a moment, please, and tell me how that kind of breaks the rules. You know, except for the U.S. trying to get Saddam Hussein on the first day of the Iraq War in 2003, and Israel then at one stage wanted to kill Saddam Hussein. Your country, doesn't usually aim for the national leader.
This is very true, Dan, but we don't see Khamenei as an ordinary national leader in the sense that, elected or not even elected, but a legitimate national leader, because this person personally was one of the most vigorous terrorists on earth since he came to power in the 80s. All of the initiation of terror regarding the Hezbollah, regarding the Iranians themselves, and regarding other proxies were coming from his backyard, from his orders and his initiation. And I'm talking about almost 1,200 Americans that had been killed by this person through the years. I mean, 1,200 Americans. I think it's the second to the Bin Laden and Al Qaeda in the damage inflicted on American and American assets. So, in that sense, the killing of Khamenei is a killing of a head of the monstrous terror group that inflicted terror around the world for decades. Now, this thing you have to remember is in the model theater, in the shadow warfare, most powerful weapon is not necessarily the bomb or the missile. It's a line, sometimes codes and lines and so on, combined with people on the ground. Okay, so what we have seen here in the elimination.
Let's just pause and be clear here. You're talking about there's cyber warfare, sort of an advanced form of what intelligence analysts for decades have called SIGINT, signals intelligence, using electronics. The Israelis are masters at, well, cyber warfare. But you also mentioned what the analysts call HUMINT, the human intelligence. And I was reading, I think it was the memoir of the former Mossad chief Yossi Cohen, who's proud to have put them together into a form of human and signals electronic intelligence all together, because you still need the human being. You're not going to depend on AI. But go there. That's being used in this war, this combination.
Absolutely, Dan. You're very, very correct. This combination, the outcome of this 40 seconds and 40 people is an outcome of a marathon of a multi-layer and a multi-year intelligence cycle that combines exactly the ingredients that you were talking, the technology, the cyber, but also the human factor, which is called human. You cannot, in the end of the day, do and achieve all these ambitious targets without having people on the ground that can gather all those technologies into the same place where you have to install it and in D-Day to use it. So this is the outcome. And also, let's not forget that all the time you have to work under the radar, because the biggest hurdle to that is of course the enemy, because they are expecting things like that, and so you want to work without leaving any footprint and any digital footprint. So this is I would say the challenge in working on such an operation. Not just that, but and it's very important to remember we're talking about a long process that took years to build in a multi-layer system.
Right. It came out in the Lebanese front against Hezbollah that in September of 2024, and the Israelis leaked this almost right away and then put two Mossad men on CBS 60 Minutes, right? The exploding beepers, the exploding pagers and walkie-talkies. Talk about a long operation. About a decade before, the Mossad started manufacturing and then selling to Hezbollah. Hezbollah was in effect paying for its own demise, buying those devices with a small amount of explosives inside. Let's just say that in the Iran front, which is larger, a country of 90 million people, it is the master of all the proxies, including Hezbollah. We may not know exactly what those plots entail, but there must be larger versions of the pagers and walkie-talkie plots that are engaged all the time in Iran by the Mossad, yes?
Naturally, I cannot refer to any existing operation simply because I don't know. I'm out of the organization for quite some time, and even if I had known, I wouldn't share it because of confidential business.
Okay,
but I can just say in general terms.
Let me try another one on you. Pushy journalist here, Oded, that I am. There were sources who leaked after the 12-day war last June that almost all the Israeli spies in Iran were non-Israeli. That meant that there were sources close to the Mossad who wanted this story out there, whether it's to scare the Iranians, shake up Iran, that Israel has a lot of people in the various minority groups and even Persian people in Iran who are willing to act against the regime and help Israel and be trained in Israel, and the use of non-Israelis. Very unusual in the world of espionage, something that perhaps the Mossad has accomplished uniquely. How would you comment as an outsider?
No, it's not. It's not something new. Or it's not a modus operandi that hasn't been used before. It's something that existed for many years, using all sort of sources or assets, what you call them in the jargon of espionage. You have to understand something regarding Iran. Iran is 90 million people with around 20 different ethnic groups. That and a border of around 3,600 miles. And it's an open border. You cannot close this border. There's no gate, there's no wall, there's no nothing, with about, I think, 5 countries, if I'm not mistaken. So relatively, and I say it's relatively, it's not too challenging of a mission to work within Iran. First of all, there is a very big resentment around surrounding those ethnic groups. I'm talking about the Kurds, the Baluchis, the Turkmeni, the Azaris, the Wahhazis, all of them. And all of them has some sort of resentment towards the central command or central rulership of the mullah. Let's not forget, the Persian are only 40% of Iran. So in that sense, it's a little bit more easier to operate on Iranian ground than, let's say, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq at the time, in Egypt, in all those places. It's almost impossible to maintain some sort of a grip on 90 million people, especially with the ethnic diversity. So in that sense, it was a very good hunting ground for the Mossad, and not too, let's say, difficult to tackle, mainly because the economic situation is terrible, and sometimes people are willing to make the extra mile for an extra buck. And also the fact that there is a lot of internal resentment ideologically towards the regime, which is in a way some sort of, I would say, a good situation for any intelligence service that wants to operate.
Okay, so that's helped the Mossad recruit non-Israelis to operate in Iran. And in addition, of course, in the streets, we saw it in December and especially January, a huge number of protesters in Iran in so many cities, and then it was brutally put down. And President Trump said, help is on the way. We're going to help you. So by authorizing the attack that took place this past Saturday, President Trump is saying that's what we're doing. Prime Minister Netanyahu, your prime minister, in some of his broadcasts, right, a message put out in the Persian Farsi language, urging the Iranian people to take their future in their own hands. Is that a clear war goal? And speak, okay, as an Israeli analyzing your own government, your own prime minister, and his ambitions, is it a necessity to overthrow Iran's Islamic regime and only then you can call it a victory? Or is the war really about weakening Iran and humbling it so it's not so threatening?
It's an excellent question, Dan, and I think it's quite a debate around the decision makers and especially in the commentators. What are the goals of this campaign? Is it to weaken Iran to a point that will pose no threat to its neighbors, especially to Israel? It will stop the ballistic missile program, will stop the nuclear program, and will stop, of course, creating all those proxies with the ring of fire that they did? Is it enough? Or it is a necessity to overturn this regime? My personal point of view, that unless you topple this regime, you solve nothing. Listen, in the 12 days war, most of the commentators and the people, and even President Trump and Netanyahu, bragged and declared it's over. We eradicated the whole nuclear program. We annihilated their ballistic capabilities. Thank you very much. It's all over. And see where we are right now. See how
President
fast.
Trump, by the way, President Trump several times after June said they wouldn't dare restart their nuclear program and their missile program because they want a deal. Now, I guess he prefers a deal, doesn't want to go to war, wants eventually to win the Nobel Peace Prize. And yet he came around and let's go there, right? A controversial issue that a lot of the viewers on this Moment Magazine Zoominar will wonder, what's your view? Again, 15 years or so out of the Mossad, an independent analyst, probably not approving of everything Netanyahu does, but he managed to persuade Trump that there's no other way except to use the military might. So, who was it first? Who convinced whom? I think Netanyahu over time persuaded Trump.
I don't know, and I don't want to get into this very, very delicate issue because it serves all those anti-Zionists and anti-Israel saying, yeah, Israel has drove Trump into a war which is not related to the United States. We have nothing to do with that. We've heard Tucker Carlson, we heard Megyn Kelly, and we heard all those people say, yeah, we were driven by Netanyahu into this war. It's not true. Let's not forget one thing. Iran with nuclear capabilities, and we see what they are doing now to its neighbors in this brutal, vicious, almost irrational attack on Turkey, on Azerbaijan, on its neighboring countries. Just imagine what would have happened if we were the part of the nuclear club. And they were that close, because let's not forget, they had possessed 480 kilo of enriched uranium to a level of 62%. They have 3.5 tons of uranium enriched to 3.2%, and they have the facilities. They have the centrifuges in Fordow, in Natanz, in Isfahan, and in some other places that can do the job very, very quickly. Just to understand, it's about 12, I would say between 2 weeks and a month to reach to upgrade from 60% to 90%, which is the level that is capable for nuclear bomb. By the way, 480 kilos is 11 nuclear facilities in nuclear bomb.
Nuclear bombs, right? And I don't mean to minimize it, but that enriched uranium may well be at the bottom of bomb damage from last June. The fear is that Iran would dig and dig and dig and would have it. And we don't frankly know where it is. And international inspectors haven't been in there. Yeah, I got you. So that danger exists. So perhaps you'd prefer that I say that Netanyahu and Trump, in their frequent conversations and 7 meetings, no foreign leader saw Trump more than Netanyahu did. It was a meeting of the minds with their analysts and their advisors. They came together on the notion that really the only way to stop Iran is to take this action. Trump has lately said it. Negotiations were leading nowhere, right? All his advisors would say, you can't believe them anyway. Maybe you can make a deal like Obama did that was supposed to last for 10, 15 years. You apparently did not trust the notion of a deal with Iran, not you.
Of course not. You have to understand something. You're absolutely right. I think that you put it very, very wisely and correctly. I think it was some sort of a brainstorm between the Israelis and the Americans that came finally to the conclusion that there is no alternative but to attack, because the Iranians were playing around, playing on time. They're the greatest bazaar merchants on earth. And there's a saying that the Iranian had never won a war in 200 years, but never lost a deal. So in that case, I think it was more of exchange of idea that eventually came to this concrete attack. I have to say something about the regime. You cannot go into any sort of agreement with a regime that its leaders are in the morning say death to America, death to Israel, and they mean it. And they mean it. This is the most extremist jihadist regime on earth. They had actually invented a startup for the Shia. You understand who are the Shia? The Shia are minorities among the Muslim people. They're only 20%. Usually they were the downgraded and humiliated and so on. And here in 1979, they come to power. They make Iran an empire, and they never aborted even for a second their jihadic stand, and based on religious and Quran and so on, that is to eradicate Israel. And you ask yourself, what the hell do they want with this tiny little country that has no mutual border, that poses no threat to them? Why should they even bother with that? The thing is, you have to go back to what Khomeini, the leader, the creator of the Republic, had said. He said, Israel is the mad dog that America sends to bite the Islam. And this is the essence of this regime. So no deal can work with them on a long term, and their recovery is amazing. Okay, let's assume in 10 days we come to some sort of an agreement with the Iranians. They raise a white flag from the trenches. They said, we want to talk. We want to go back to the negotiation table. They even will sign whatever you want. They even signed an open check for you under these circumstances. They even give you millions of dollars into Dan's bank account. That's worth nothing. That's worth nothing.
So just to be clear, that's your scenario. What if the war ends in a couple of weeks? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. It's not me. It's the king of Saudi who said that don't believe even if an Iranian tells you 100 words, only one word is true. This is the nature of this regime, and unless we change this regime, there's no other solution. It's not just degrading their capabilities. It's not just diminishing their power. It's not just cutting off their proxies. It's a total change of the regime. Now, it's not going to happen in one day, Dan. It's something that we are not going to see cut and paste what we've seen in Julan in Damascus, where they storm with Toyota SUV into Damascus, and the collapse is in 4 days. No, it's not. We're not going to see it. It's a very, very powerful and immense regime. It will take few vectors to connect together in order to make the change, but it's absolutely, we're on the way, and that's exactly what's going to happen.
Okay, so we have to wonder, of course, if someone's going to run out of offensive missiles, it could be the Iranians, or if someone's going to run out of defensive systems and interceptors, which could be Israel and the U.S., and the U.S. forces will always want to keep some in reserve, and the Pentagon always says that to the president. We cannot blow everything we have, even as U.S. defense manufacturers try to speed up the creation of new weapons and replacements. It's not easy. I don't want our audience to think that we invited someone here, who's just in support of the war and telling us it's going well, but we must be patient. That's some of the messages you're sending, former Mossad senior man Oded Ailam from Tel Aviv. That's part of the message. But help me with this one, because we're going to go now to talk about some of the understandable anti-war voices. Right? You mentioned some on the right side of politics in the U.S. You said Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly. Of course, there are those on the left side of politics who are traditionally anti-war and believe that the U.S. in its way is imperialistic and trying to solve problems by force. And if you have kind of a left-wing point of view, you find that Israel, Netanyahu's government, is always trying to solve things by force instead of putting diplomacy, even peace feelers to the Palestinians much higher. Okay, I've mixed up a lot of topics, but there are two clear paths that a lot of observers of Israel talk about. Whether you've chosen the way of war And maybe after the Hamas massacres and kidnappings of October 7th, 2.5 years ago, there's no choice. Whether Israel chose war, and later you'll get to diplomacy. And you're hoping the Abraham Accords will bring in Saudi Arabia and you'll be very accepted in the region. But we're going through a rough and ugly period. What's your view on that? Is this a rough and ugly period where Israel has a bad image around the world, including among many Americans?
Dan, I'm not a Netanyahu supporter. I never voted for him, and I will never vote for him. So in that sense, I feel very comfortable in what I'm saying and what I'm going to say. Okay, I think Netanyahu had made quite a lot of mistakes during this campaign. I don't want even to get into it, and definitely after what we had suffered on 7th of October, he has to go. There's no doubt about it. He has to take responsibility. He was in charge. It was on his watch, and he has to go. But nevertheless, I think Trump and Netanyahu and all the system that surrounds there are doing the right thing. I don't see any sort of alternative. And I really hope they will be able to discourage the noises that are coming from the left side progressive of the Democratic Party, and also inside some of the hardliners, MAGA Republicans, because when you face evil, there is no other alternative. Then we have seen what happened in Europe in the 30s. You know, if you remember, at April 1940, Hitler had just finished off with Poland, and he turned to his generals. He said, "Now we're going to get Western Europe," and all these generals told him, "You're out of your mind. They will wipe us out. The French army is the most powerful army on earth." And he said, "No, they don't have the will to fight." And he was right. And when you face evil, there is no negotiation, there is no bargain. As Churchill said, if you trying to appease the crocodile in order that he will eat you the last, that's going to be the end of you. And this is exactly what is needed now. And I really hope that the Americans and the Europeans will understand this historical hour and historical moment of fighting the regime, and then we can go back in our petty fighting and so on.
All of you who are viewing, please, on the Moment Magazine Zoom in, or if you're seeing it live as we're doing this on March 5th, on your Zoom screen, there's probably Q&A, so feel free to type questions. We will go to your questions. Suzanne Borden of Moment Magazine will read them out soon. So please do type questions. Here's one for you, the ugly side of war. I mean, part of what happens is that many people viewing here hate war. There's a lot of anti-war people in the US who especially don't want to be sucked into another Middle Eastern war, expensive in both blood and money. And then they see incidents like the girls' school, apparently hit in Iran on the very first day, reported to be well over 100 deaths of students, and the Pentagon just doesn't want to talk about it. Israel pretty much said that wasn't the area of Iran that we were dealing with, so maybe it was the Americans, and the Americans just don't want to talk about it, which, maybe they'll get away with some of the horrors that happened. And here's another one, right? Proudly on Wednesday, the United States used a submarine for the first time since World War II to sink an enemy vessel, right? An Iranian Navy ship. What was it? 1,500 miles away from the theater of war. It was returning from a kind of naval parade in India, on just peacefully sailing along.
Peacefully sailing along? Peacefully? Again, are you serious? Peacefully, a Navy ship, Iranian, when Iranians are attacking almost everything that moves, you call a naval ship peacefully sailing along? I simply don't get it.
Okay, so you would see it as a target of opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, that was that ship near Sri Lanka.
Today it's near Malaysia. Tomorrow it blocks the Hormuz Straits. That's simple as that.
In other words, that ship might well have joined the war and the effort to close the shipping lanes in the
Absolutely.
Strait of Hormuz. Now, about the school, it reminds us of the Gaza war. Mistakes may happen. There is collateral damage. But I guess you can assure us that certainly from the Israeli side, there is no desire to hit a school.
Of course not. First of all, by the way, I think it's been investigated. It's not sure whether it's actually a missed target by the Americans. It's not Israel. Israel hasn't been conducted in this arena at all, or it could be also a failed Iranian missile that hit the place. I don't know. I don't know. But then things like that are awful. And believe me, I served in the Yom Kippur War, and I know what war means exactly. And it's terrible. And the loss of innocent people, it's terrible. And every single person that is lost, especially those poor girls, I really, really feel awful and sad about it. But this is the part, the ugly part, as you said, of the war, and the unfortunate part of the war. And I hope it will be minimized and it will not happen again. But that's the nature of war.
But that has an impact, I know you'll acknowledge, on support in the United States and around the world for what Israel and the U.S. are doing. Critics are pointing to those incidents, as you know. Let's talk about espionage a little. Right now, counter-espionage. How concerned is Israel, how concerned are you, with a growing number of Israeli citizens who accepted Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in secret accounts to do favors for Iranian intelligence, taking photographs around the homes of ministers, including the prime minister, doing other things for Iranian intel, plus Iran's increasing capability to also hack into Israeli systems. A big concern, isn't it?
Very good question, and very good point, and very concerning point. First of all, there have been up till now about 47 arrests of Israelis. And what is interesting about it, and I'm coming now from my professional side, is the modus operandi of the Iranians. They are working on mass scale. They are saying on the big numbers. They said we will approach a direct approach. We call it in the jargon of the espionage, a direct approach to 1,000 people. Immediately, 900 say, go to hell. 100 would listen, and 10 we can recruit. And that's the way they work. They look at them as dispensable paper cup. They don't care about their security. They don't care about their safety. They don't care about their well-being, about nothing. Just do the mission. And if they catch you, if the Israeli Shin Bet catch you, sorry.
The Iranians wouldn't care. So it's not your usual professional relationship.
No. It's absolutely against the usual profession. But what is astonishing then, that it works. And it works on a large scale. And I think this is a very alarming issue that Israel has to care and to take care of. Most of them are being caught because of this sort of very, I would say, primitive direct approach. Okay, it's not sophisticated. It's nothing. They just call the guy on Instagram or TikTok or whatever social media there is, and they start talking with him and they start asking him questions, and pretty soon something that used to take about half a year, it takes about 2 days in order to recruit the guy and to send him to some sort of small missions in order to attach him to you, and then they go to an upper level. It's a very primitive, but very effective.
Especially with the use of technology, everything is sped up, except for the war. You've indicated to us, as we said, on this 6th day of the Iran war, this is not a 6-day war. And I thought Israel had learned lessons over the last 20 and 30 years. Quick wars, they work. The Israeli people can stand behind. You can have the damage to your economy. You can accept the retaliation by your enemies when it's a quick war. If it gets super long, like Lebanon, 1982 to 2000, support goes away. The Gaza war, more than 2 years. Well, you were desperate to get all the hostages home, understandably. This is not going to be a quick war? It can't be?
That's a good question, Dan, because you are absolutely right regarding the capabilities of conducting a long-lasting war by Israel, especially against some sort of miniature superpower like Iran. It's not the Hamas, it's not the Hezbollah, it's not Syria. It's a very, very dominant and powerful entity, Iran. So right now, Israel and the United States are trying to diminish as much as possible in the most effective way and as fast as possible the capabilities of the Iranians to retaliate or to do anything, because the end game is extremely important. And I think that no one, neither from Israel or from the American side, wants to see a prolonged war. The Americans don't want to see Iraq, and they don't want to see Vietnam, and they don't want to see Afghanistan. Trump prefer Maduro being transmitted with a business class on his eyes to
one leader being arrested and then make a deal with Iran. So before I turn it over to Suzanne Borden, and really those of you who are watching, if you're watching live, type in the questions. Let me ask you about that possibility. Trump reveled in the fact that he made a deal with the remaining regime in communist, anti-American Venezuela. Don't you see the possibility that Trump might revel in making a deal with a moderate, pro-business Iranian leader who wants to export oil and promises never to go nuclear? Israel wouldn't be happy.
You are absolutely right, Dan, and this is a very true comment. And I think what right now is the Israeli nightmare scenario is to see a cut and paste of what happened with the Houthis. If you remember what happened with the Houthis, there was a conflict for around 17 months between Americans, Israel, and the Houthis, and so on. And there was
threatening Western shipping in the Persian, Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, threatening very important shipping routes. And the U.S. finally decided, I've had enough. I'm going to bomb the leadership in Sana'a, in Yemen. I'm going to hit the Houthis. And then Trump did what he's done elsewhere. Well, that's it. We won. And he stopped.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. And if I see some sort of a risk of this campaign and a different end game from what is anticipated, is exactly what you said. And but Trump is completely unpredictable, and I cannot really understand what goes in his mind, even if I try. As a very, very sophisticated intelligence officer, I cannot go into this guy's mind.
Well, that's very good. And that's often the work of a sophisticated intelligence officer. Okay, that's Oded Ailam in Tel Aviv. I'm Dan Raviv, and here's Suzanne Borden at Moment Magazine headquarters to share some questions from viewers.
Thank you both very much. We've gotten a lot of comments from people how much they appreciate this conversation and just hearing the answers to all of the questions. I will say quite a few people have asked about the Kurds and the question of them being given arms to fight the IRGC. And is there any truth to that? Will this work if they're not involved? What are your comments about that?
Dan or me?
Oded, you take it first, no matter what. So about the Kurdish people, and I know there's been cooperation with certain segments of the Kurds for decades between, say, Israel and Kurds.
First of all, you have to understand something about the Kurds. The Kurds are very suspicious on American motives and the American affiliation and trust. They were abandoned by the Americans in Syria. They were abandoned by the Americans in Iraq. Although they demonstrated great efforts in annihilating ISIS, still they were abandoned. So they're not that sure they want to give another try to the Americans that claims they will support them if they start charging into Iran. Let's not forget, there are the Kurds are around 40 million people living in different countries like Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and so on. This is the largest non-state ethnic group on earth, and they are not united. They are divided. They are the Iraqi Kurds, they are the Iranian Kurds, and they are the Syrian Kurds who have some sort of autonomy. And so I am absolutely sure that the CIA and other agencies were trying to offer some sort of assistance and guarantee to the Kurds in order to facilitate some sort of military invasion of Iran from the west and the north. But I'm not that certain how much the Kurds are really trusting in the American open check and how much they're willing to make some sort of another startup pilot regarding charging into Iran, facing the Revolutionary Guard and so on, because they've seen what happened in the end, and I think they're more hesitant and more reluctant than we think they are.
What do you think, Oded? Bottom line, Kurdish forces could cause some trouble to the Iranian regime in certain areas, but it's not like the Kurds will march into Tehran or the holy city of Qom and take over, because those aren't Kurdish places.
Absolutely, you're right. Let's not forget the Kurds are Sunni, and we're talking about Shia, and I don't see them march on Toyota into Tehran-style Julani, but they can inflict a lot of damage on the Republican guards in the north, and they can cause a lot of trouble and turmoil within Iran, within other ethnic groups, that if they succeed in doing that, they can stir up the rest of the ethnic groups, especially the Baluchi and the Ahwazi on the coast, and the Turkmani. And so if they are succeeding in causing or inflicting a lot of damage on the Republican guards, that will encourage other groups to do the same. And so I think the Republican guards are on high alert in order to try to avoid such a catastrophe.
And by the way, from a U.S. point of view, that kind of fragmentation is probably not a good thing. You could end up with Libya, a lot of factions, a long civil war. You're not going to get a smooth export of oil. You'll have a power vacuum that terrorist groups usually walk into and start growing. So we probably don't want chaos. So everyone should think about, what is it you really want in the end, right? The end of the Islamic hardline, anti-Western, anti-Israel regime, but you want a central government that still works.
Absolutely, Dan. That's very true.
Well, you set up the next question perfectly. Trump just announced that he would like to pick the next leader of Iran. Who would be acceptable, do you think, both to the United States and Israel, to be the leader of Iran, and who's waiting in the wings?
I think this is one of the series of stupid remarks by Trump to say such a thing, because it reflects the patronage, and he also, I think, it's not even, doesn't sound good to Iranian ears that detest the regime. We are not subordinates of Mr. Trump. Let's not forget, in 1953, the Americans had toppled a democratic regime in Iran, headed by Mossad, and they put the Shah Pahlavi, was that time a figurehead, and that's all. And nobody in Iran wants to hear that they are going to be a state of the United States, or a proxy or subordinates. So I simply can't understand the logic of Mr. Trump saying such a thing. But nevertheless, I think that what we are going to see is somewhat similar to some sort of a collapse of a totalitarian regime. We have seen it in Russia. If you remember, there was an intermediate term where Gorbachev with the Prostroika and so on, and then the final collapse of Russia. We are going to see probably some moderate people ruling Iran, or we are going to see some army generals creating some sort of a coup combined with the CIA, taking control of Iran for a certain period of time. And Dan was absolutely right what he said, that this integration of Iran is the worst thing that can happen to the Middle East and the world. So it's important that whoever comes next will maintain the integrity of Iran. I can see some figures, but I don't think they are capable of taking over, like Rouhani, or maybe, I don't know, Moussaoui is under house arrest for almost 2 years. He was the prime minister. Even Pezeshkian, in a way, can do it, but they are weak, they are not acceptable, and I don't think the Americans really want them to be in power because of the fact that they might lead to disintegration of Iran.
And to be fair, we should mention Reza Pahlavi, the son of the deposed dead Shah, living in the U.S. mostly, trying to get a meeting at the White House. Reza Pahlavi is in the media all the time, broadcasting in Farsi and in English, and on CBS 60 Minutes last weekend. And he wants to be seen as the heir apparent, though he says, I don't want to rule Iran. I want to be a transition figure to democracy. President Trump says publicly, he seems like a nice man, but I don't think he has the support at home. Now, some of the protesters in Iran did bring out the old royal flags and chanted Pahlavi, Pahlavi. That's some people. Are you sharing my view, Oded? It's
absolutely, Dan. You're absolutely right. Pahlavi is not accepted on the majority of the Iranian people. They look upon him as a spoiled child who lived on the money his father stole from the people of Iran. He has no charisma at all. He's not a figure that can take over even for a short period of time. And the fact that his name was mentioned and flags and so on, it's mainly among dissidents who are outside of Iran, not among the Iranian people. He is not in any way a candidate to take over Iran.
Somebody asked a question about the controversial group, the MEK, and are they might be a useful purpose to the U.S. and Israel. And if you want to maybe take 1 minute just to explain who they are.
I don't know. I don't even want to get into more details about them because they're really not important factor. They're not really relevant to what's happening. I don't think we should spare any time on that.
It's Mujahideen Khalq. It's Mujahideen Khalq. They've had a presence in Syria, kind of close to Turkey. So Turkey's President Erdogan likes to bomb them and say they're a bunch of communists. Bottom line, it's just one of the many factions that Oded was talking about in saying the Kurds are not united.
Thank you. I know you started the conversation with Russia and China, but a few people would like to hear a little bit more about why they haven't said more. Do you think they'll eventually say something and get involved, and where that stands?
I will just interject. Their media are very anti-American and anti-Israel, in this war. Media messages. Go ahead, Oded.
That's the media, and it's lip service, and that's all. It's very interesting what's happening regarding it. But let's not forget that. Let's take Russia, for instance. They completely abandoned the Assad regime immediately. They didn't even try to assist him against Giuliani, and they said, we are out of it. It's not of our business. Yeah, you can live in Moscow and play some video games all day, but we are not going to take any part in that sense. And
that's the Syria story. Even though Russia has a naval and air base in Syria,
absolutely, yeah,
they just smelled that Assad was a loser and gave up on him. Okay, so apply this to big Iran.
The same apply for big Iran, exactly as Dan said. If in Syria, where they had air force, air bases, navy, and a lot of interest. They deserted Syria in about, I think, 12 hours. You come to think about Iran. Now, regarding Iran, at the beginning of Ukraine war, the Iranian had assisted the Russians with drones, with missiles, with everything, because otherwise I think the Russian would have been in a terrible position. And what happens is that the Russian had managed to manufacture them by themselves. They don't need the assistance and the support of the Iranians anymore. And in that sense, they lost some of their interest in Iran. And definitely right now, where Putin is up to here in the Ukraine model, he doesn't care and he doesn't have any affiliation and attention to Iran. Saying that there's no way he's going to confront the U.S. on the Iranian matter. So the media and the UN and so on. But the fact is, he abandoned completely this regime, and in fact, it doesn't really care if this regime falls. Regarding China, I think I had elaborated before. Understand it's incredible regarding China, but you have to understand the Chinese mentality. The Chinese mentality, the thinking of the Chinese, and the way they perceive their role in the world, and they don't want to engage in any sort of a military conflict with the United States because they are absolutely inferior to the American power. Also, we just heard there is a lot of chaos within the top echelons of the Chinese army. A lot of the generals were lately moved from their positions, so it also deter the Chinese from doing any sorts of a movement in the Persian Gulf or anything. But you have to remember one thing which is important, that the oil supply comes, 15% of the oil supply of China comes from Iran, especially from a very tiny, small island port called Kharj. About 85% of the oil comes from this tiny island, and they are really afraid that if this thing escalates, the United States will bomb Kharj. The Kharj is less than Brooklyn, and you can just imagine the damage it can cause. So the Chinese are walking on a tightrope on ice, and not in order not to appear as someone who is backing this regime. I think they gave up on this regime.
I'll just add for fun to finish up, Suzanne, the Chinese are walking on, what did Oded say? Tightrope, ice. Let's add eggshells.
Thank you. I know we need to wrap up, but if I wanted to see if I could squeeze in two more quick questions, if you have an extra moment. The first question is, does Israel plan to do anything to try to get out any of the Iranian Jews who would like to leave?
No, they can leave. The Iranian Jews in Iran are free to go. They are not under any threat from the regime right now. They were allowed to go all the time, in and out, and they travel a lot to Europe, to the United States, and so on. And Israel has no obligation right now for the Iranian Jews, but
because they aren't in danger. I got you. And the Mossad historically has rescued Jewish communities in foreign countries when they've been in danger. I hear you. And by the way, all Iranian citizens are strictly limited to the export of their belongings and their money. So that's the kind of limitation you've heard about. But that's not just Jews. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of Jews had deported Iran through Turkey, to Azerbaijan, to Iraq and other places. There weren't really any restrictions on those except what Dan had said, which restrict every Iranian citizen. But if it comes to being some sort of a threat or retaliation, by the people, the Iranian people, some or the Basij or the Republican Guards against the Jews, I can assume that there are some plans to evacuate them, but right now I don't see any necessity.
And then finally, when the war ends, might there be a possibility for peace accords with some of the Gulf states when this is all said and done?
Dan, please.
Well, that's what the United States is hoping for, widening the Abraham Accords, which is something that President Trump is proud of having started. My view is that Trump gave Saudi Arabia last year just about everything the Saudis wanted. A defense agreement, the ability to buy the arms and aircraft that Saudi Arabia wanted, being open to Saudi investment, also huge investments from Qatar. That is really not a good friend of the U.S. or Israel. Qatar's been hit by Iran now, so Qatar's, I guess, angry at everybody. Listen, that's just a lot of chaos. I'm not so sure the Abraham Accords will be extended soon or that Saudi Arabia will feel they have to recognize Israel. I do see, this shakeup will, if the U.S. seems successful, the shakeup will result in a big pro-Western bloc. And so that may be part of the Trump victory. And I know a lot of our viewers don't like Trump, but he may score a victory for U.S. strategy in this. He might.
I absolutely agree with every word Dan had said, and I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Well, on that note, we will end. Thank you, Oded. Thank you, Dan, for this really important, informative conversation. Thank you to everyone who is watching. This will be available on our website this evening, so please share, watch again, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.